Good afternoon, and welcome to this informational session that we're having for IdeaLabs. We want to try to give you as much information as possible so that it can help you in your presentation before the judges on February 12th, excuse me, on February 19th, when we will have the actual local competition. Let me give you a little background about IdeaLabs and Blackstone Launchpad. Blackstone Launchpad has been given the responsibility to run the student competition for Lorain County Community College. And the purpose of this competition is to open it up for entrepreneurs, wannabe entrepreneurs, to see if they have an idea that could be used in the future venture that they want to develop. IdeaLabs came out of the EEC, the Entrepreneurial Education Consortium, which consists of 11 schools throughout Northeast Ohio. 10 of those schools are four-year institutions. We are the 11th and the only community college within the consortium. What will happen is each of the 11 schools will have a local competition on their campus, and then everyone will then come to the regional competition. The winners of each of the schools will come to the regional competition, which will be held actually here at Lorain County Community College on Tuesday, March 31st in Spitzer Conference Center. But going back to the local competition, there's some key dates that you should be aware of. Key dates being that Thursday, February 12th, your concept feasibility paper is due by 10 a.m. Friday, February 13th, your PowerPoint is due. And Thursday, February 19th, then you will be presenting before a 5-judge panel. The competition will go from 1 o'clock until 5 o'clock in room PC 101. That's the PC building 101 on that. What we would like to do also is refer you to the paperwork that was given out. The first one, the IdeaLabs, which is a 3-page sheet, that gives you how IdeaLabs works and also the key dates. And on the back, it gives you the concept feasibility paper instructions on what your paper should consist of. We will be introducing Heather Kishner, who will be giving you some insight into the writing of that feasibility paper. There's also a second handout which has the EEC. It's a single sheet. That also gives you some information about the concept paper. And then the third thing that was given out, and if you're looking at this on the computer, on your computer, we will have attachments that we will send to participants. It's a 1-sheet page, and it has 5 steps on it, and I'd like to go over that with you. What you need to do is under number 1 is you register at the website that is given to you. And underneath that, it's very important that you read that. And the reason is because you need to have your name, your class year, your major or minor, your email, your cell number, your gender, and if you are an Ohio resident or an international student, for each member of your team. Okay? When you go into that website, you need to have all that information first, because if you go in and you don't have the information, what will happen is you cannot go back in on that website and go in under your name. So you have to have all that information before you go into it. Once you submit all that information, then what will happen is you'll go to the bottom of the page, and if you're a single submission, you will fill out basically that you're an individual presenting. If you have more on your team, up to 5 people, you will have to fill out all that information for all 5 people on your team. What will happen is you'll then go to the bottom of that page, and if you are a single, it will take you the bottom of page 1, it will take you to page 6. If you are a team member, it will take you then to page 2, where you fill out a page for each of the team members. Then what will happen is you will then you'll end up on page 6 and you submit that. And the reason for that is we are capturing the demographics of all of our participants on that, and that's why that is being done. For everything else, if you go back to the first handout, all the dates, the submission of your paper, the submission of your PowerPoint, that will all be to Blackstone Launchpad, which is how you registered your initial letter of intent on that. With that, what I'd like to do is call Heather up and have Heather give you some pointers as to the writing for that. Heather?
Hi, I'm Heather Kickner. I teach English here at Lorain County Community College. Everything from grammar, developmental writing, basic essay writing, all the way through to some literature classes. Can I ask your names? Would that be all right? People who are here?
I'm Troy.
Hi, Troy. Hi, Jason. First of all, I want to make it clear that I'm available to you at any time to take a look at your plan, right? If you come up with a plan, I'd be happy to work with you on your papers. I'm just at hkickner@loraincccc.edu. So it's HKICHNER, and I'm at your disposal. My first piece of advice, I think, and the plan is due fairly soon, right, the 12th. So my first piece of advice is to make a plan for your plan. I would suggest sketching something out rather than trying to just sit down and write, of course. It's best to come up with some sort of an overview. Doesn't need to be a formal outline. It could probably just be some listing, right, in each category. I'm going to look at each category in a minute here. But the best thing for you to do is really sketch it out so you don't feel like you get stuck somewhere in the middle and have kind of nowhere to go from there. You want to make yourself as comfortable as you possibly can. So taking a look at the, the sort of instructions for the feasibility paper, there are 4 main categories here. The first section, the concept section, is clearly the what is it and who are your customers kind of a section, right? So you need to do things like describe. When you're doing anything like description types of writing, you want to do a couple of things. First of all, details are usually pretty good. Even though it's executive summary, I would say be specific, right? You don't want to be vague. Vagueness is really kind of an ugly monster when it comes to this sort of thing, because you want a very, very clear picture presented of what is the concept and who are you pitching it to, who are your customers. The other thing with description is description usually involves the senses, and I know that sounds kind of strange, but I've taught description for a long time, and if there's a way to make it a sensory kind of a perception, I'm not sure what your product or service would be, but description works really well when you incorporate the senses and, well, how does this product, look, sound, taste, or how does it affect texture, right? So really try to make that sort of visceral. That can really bring it to life for people. But definitely details there in getting at, what's the demand, what's the need for this, this product or service. The second section, of course, the feasibility. How can it happen, right? That's sort of the hows. How will you get the product there? Is it viable, right? I'm sure you've heard the word feasible before, right? Is this practical? Will it generate revenue? Things like that. So that's the real focus there on feasibility. And that's more of more action, right? We're going from less description to more action. What is the plan of action that you'll take to make this happen and make it a reality? The third section, as you can see, focuses on what's the market, right? Marketing, size, potential, what will be your measures of success. It's really important to have a piece in there about how do I assess my potential for success? How can I measure that? It's very important to think about assessment there. And also about what sets you apart, right? And how you can improve upon maybe something that's already existing, right? Because marketing is all about competition, right? And sort of what's different, right, about what you're doing that's not already there. And then, of course, the fourth part, if you're working on a team, it's pretty clear that's based on roles, right? Sort of the who does what. As far as the writing goes, I always focus in my mind on what I would call like the 4 C's. The first one I think is pretty obvious, but it's clarity, right? You need to be clear. The best way to be clear in your proposal is to use really concrete language. Like I said, you don't want to be vague, so use concrete words. Make your project not only noun focused, right, on things, but also verb focused, right? Verbs are very, very powerful in the English language. You want to limit, for instance, forms of be, right? Is, are, right? If I'd say, you know, how was that movie? And you say, well, it was good, right? That's not doing much to get me to go see the movie. How many people do you hear say, that was a good movie? What do you mean by that? That's not specific, it's not concrete, and it's not very exciting. Choose a better verb, right? What's the action behind this concept? So clarity is very important, and that can also have to do with sentence structure, right? How you deliver your writing. And in the English language, the most common formula for a sentence is very simple. Subject, verb, and if that verb takes an object, okay? So you want to get your agent up front in the sentence. Who's the actor? Who's doing? What's the main sort of thrust of the sentence? And then a good strong verb, and then if there's an object. For example, you know, the dog chased the ball, right? You want that sentence to be very accessible to your reader and very clear. The second reason, the second C, I think there, that relates to that is concision. To be concise doesn't necessarily mean to write short sentences, but it does mean to use an economy of language, right? So you'll want to use an economy of language in not being wordy, using extra words. For example, it's much better to say something like because instead of due to the fact that, okay? A lot of us get stuck in this kind of, you know, speak that we hear, this kind of wordy speak that we hear in our culture, and it's best to pare things down. If you can replace 5 words with 1, I think that's a good thing. So concision is very, very important. Third, even though this plan has 4 parts, I would suggest thinking about cohesion, right? Things have to cohere. And what that means is as you move from concept, right, customers, concept, to the how it can happen, to feasibility, to your market opportunity, to your team, there should be a common thread, right? There should be a way that your project sort of hangs together and how the plan and the paper hangs together cohesively. So it should really, what we would say, it should cohere. So cohesion will be very, very important to the judges, I would think. Fourth and final C, correctness. I know that one's kind of a tough one sometimes because each of us is plagued with probably a different Achilles heel when it comes to grammar and writing. I know what mine are. You might know what yours are, or maybe we could discover that along the way. Sentence structure, like I said, is very critical. You want to write in complete sentences. I know that's obvious, but make sure that you don't have fragments like incomplete sentences or run-ons that sort of crash together. So really think about sentence structure. For this kind of a setting, sentence variety isn't critical. So you won't want every sentence to be the same, but by the same token, you don't want really long, lyrical, winding sentences. There's that concision piece again. Other things that I would pay attention to with correctness, besides sentence structure, I mean, obviously the whole paper will get a good sort of a hearty proofreading, right, and editing. Make sure that along with correctness, it's clean. I guess that kind of is another C that hangs with correctness there. A clean draft is really important, right? You want to make your presentation look really good. I've been in situations where, 300 graduate students apply for one position, and if there's a typo, that project doesn't cut it, right? So the one little thing can set a sort of a bad impression. So you want to make sure that you're as correct as you can be. Get as many eyes as you can on it, right? Get as many readers as you can from different audiences, right? Get their feedback. Seek lots of feedback. Other things with correctness would include things like, punctuation. I guess the comma, day of the C, the comma can be really tricky. Most people either obsess and love the comma or they're comma shy. So my suggestion there is maybe read some parts out loud. The critical parts of the plan, read it out loud. See how it sounds. See if there are some natural lulls and places where you think you might be able to use those punctuation marks effectively. Most commas that writers miss tend to be introductory commas. In other words, you have an introductory phrase and then the main thrust of your sentence. So for instance, in the middle of the night, comma, the storm raged on, right? There's that introductory part and then we get to the subject. So if you want one strong comma rule, I would say put a comma before your subject in your sentence and you're probably going to be in pretty good shape. Okay. Are there any questions in particular about content or organization or grammar that you have for me? I won't be able to stay around too late today, but like I said, and if you came in late, my email again is hkichner, okay, at loraincccc.edu. Sorry, it's a weird last name. KICHNER at Lorain CC. Okay.
Heather, thank you very much. We appreciate your information and your willingness to work with our students. This time, what we'd like to do is now introduce Mike Sipselny. Mike will give us some hints on the proper way to do a PowerPoint, the pros and cons for a PowerPoint. Mike?
Thank you, Lee. I'm glad to be here today. So Heather, you're no longer going to be advising students to set their presentations to rhyme. They're not going to be wrapping their presentations. I think we've moved beyond that nowadays. Okay, I think that's good. I am here to talk about giving presentations digitally, but I'm not going to be so self-centered as to say this is the proper way. Since it's self-expression, there's not really anything that's necessarily proper. Whatever you do might be proper for you, but you might not communicate quite as clearly as you could. And from experience being both a student and a presenter, I'm going to tell you a few things that I have learned over the years as pretty good habits. First, I'm going to say it's good to arrive early if possible to make sure that you iron out problems that might happen with the equipment. You may have your presentation on a thumb drive, and you may want to make sure that the PowerPoint you've got, everything will work with the equipment that's available. You may need some time to solve those technical problems. And you may need, for example, a microphone as I do today because I am being recorded today. Make sure you have time to set that up and get all the recording going. Make sure that the projector is working and adequate for the dimensions that you've made your presentation. And you may have preliminary questions from your audience members that need to be asked before you can even begin your presentation. Also, you must allow for human error on the part of yourself, your audience, the technical people in the room where you're presenting, and maybe your co-presenters if you have any. And all of that can be helped quite a bit by arriving early. You should also know the equipment you're going to be working with. You'll want to know how to advance and retreat the slides. They may give you a little clicker to play with. You don't want to be learning that thing in the middle of your presentation and make a bad revelation of a slide or something like that. Know how that works. If you don't know how it works, then stick to the keyboard or the mouse, whatever you're familiar with. If you've got videos in your presentation, you could be in for a terrible surprise, as has happened to me in the middle of lectures before. If you have, for example, a Windows media file that you want to play in your PowerPoint presentation. PowerPoint's a Windows product. Windows Media is a Windows product. It works great on your computer. There's Windows Media Player and PowerPoint on the computer you're going to be using. Everything's fine. No, it's not. Windows Media Player and some other media players have a lot of different, they're called codecs, coder and decoder software. And if you're sticking your thumb drive into a strange computer expecting it to play your media file, you may be in for a surprise. It may just crash and not play at all. Just because it's Windows Media Player does not mean it's got the right codecs. Now, if you're dealing with something that's on YouTube and it plays in a Flash player, you're probably safe. But another way to be safe about that is to bring your own laptop that already has the right media player on it. There you might get into the screen dimensions with the projector. It might not look as good as it could, but you're better off that way if media is an important part of your presentation. Let's talk about the content. I recommend using large fonts. It's tragic that in some of the classes you may take in some very astute academic institutions, you may find yourself in a presentation with PowerPoint slides that were made by the actual textbook publisher. And that presentation may give you a wall of text in a 10-point font that's down here. And the fortunate people who sit up in the front will be able to read everything, and anyone in the back and anyone looking on the camera won't be able to see diddly in your presentation. So I recommend nice large fonts all the time because the back of the room needs to be able to read your presentation. And if you don't know how big the room is, then make them even bigger. And it must be legible in a camera that is recording it. I also recommend high contrasting colors and making your presentations dynamic. Oh, I need to go on to another slide. All right, use the high contrasting color. I'm using here black text on white, and that's pretty good. Everybody ought to be able to read that. Red background with blue text is not so good, and there are many other color choices you could make that are really terrible. Light colors and dark colors, highly contrasting, are pretty good. Believe it or not, blue and red isn't that much of a contrast, though you might think it is. What else have we got? Okay, make your presentations dynamic. You notice what I'm doing here. I am not just throwing up a wall of text. I'm revealing a little bit at a time. That every few seconds there's something different going on the screen. Even though I don't have any movies or any animation, I'm just revealing a little bit and giving you something new to pay attention to, new to think about, instead of throwing this wall where you might be reading ahead and not paying attention to my wonderful talking up here. I recommend having lots of pictures, diagrams, and animations, and I have actually failed you on my own recommendation so far. I haven't had any diagrams, pictures. I haven't had really any animation, just revealing a few lines of text, and for that I apologize, and so I give you a photo of me as the Christmas elf at the office Christmas party. And this will be, I guarantee you, the most memorable slide of the presentation that any of you have seen. You will remember seeing me in the Christmas elf hat at the end of the presentation. Okay, you may have heard this before in Heather's presentation. I'll just throw out engaging the audience members. It's okay. I'm not sure what kind of presentations you're doing, but if you're teaching some material, if you're trying to keep them paying attention to you, it's okay when you're doing some instruction to give them some easy question. Ask people in the audience, so what's your name? Where are you from? What's your hometown? Engage them in talking to you so that they won't be afraid to interact with you during your presentation. I like to, in some of my classes, ask questions like your favorite cartoon character or favorite car, or I like cars, or musicians, bands, whatever. Questions that they can't get wrong. It's nice to start with something like that. And if you're going to ask questions later on that they can get wrong, they'll be less shy about responding and interacting with you. And also, it's good to be enthusiastic. It's good to be larger than life. It's good to modulate your voice like I'm doing up here. Move around a little bit. And that will keep the audience awake. That will keep them paying attention to you instead of the dreary weather that might be happening in February in Northern Ohio. Any questions? Yeah.
Mike, they will be doing presentations before 5 judges,
Uh-huh.
presenting an idea,
Mm-hmm.
and the idea that they're coming up with. Do you have anything specific to them?
So this is a competition? Okay, he's just told me that they're presenting for judges in a competition. The rules of the competition, do the judges ask questions and interact with the presenters?
The presentation will be 7 minutes, the Q&A will be 3 minutes.
Oh, so the judges only ask questions during the 3 minutes after the 7-minute presentation. Then don't worry so much about getting them to interact with you. Don't waste any time asking silly questions unless it's kind of a bonding strategy that you're forming with the judges and it's relevant to your presentation. In that case, it could be a good strategy to ask them something like, so do you like the Cleveland Browns? If your presentation has something to do with football or something to do with the Browns or something, a harmless question at the beginning could be a really good start. But as far as interacting with the audience, I'd say keep it moving quickly then during your 7 minutes of your presentation. Have lots of dynamic things going on the screen. If you're going to switch off between team members during the presentation, obviously you'll have rehearsed who's speaking about what, when. Be quick about that and have everybody stay on pace and make your slides, once again, very easy to read and very clear. Don't have any graphs or diagrams that are unclear or confusing that will cause the audience to say, would you go back to slide number 17 and please, if they couldn't understand it the first time, you may not have done it great. It's okay to go back to the slide if they understood it, but if they didn't understand it, your graph was probably not that clear and you're probably already in a little bit of trouble. So rehearse it in front of another audience so that they can ask those questions first and you can make everything clear in your presentation. Yes, question now.
So knowing that they have 7 minutes to present,
Knowing they have 7 minutes to present,
what would you recommend as far as the slide deck? How many slides would you say would be?
yeah, I would say 30 slides would be too many in a 7-minute presentation. I would say, well, I bet my presentation was pretty close to 7 minutes. How many slides did I have there? 8. Yeah. So I would say probably 7 to 10 slides for a 7-minute presentation.
And then I have a follow-up.
You probably won't get through more. Yeah.
So,
Chance before you go on, may I make a comment, Mike?
Yes.
On that as to the number. If you have a slide that is very important that you want to get in, but you're over the number, you can put that as an appendix, and hopefully they'll ask a question about that, and then you can zip to that slide as your appendix.
Lee said if there's something you might need to include in your presentation that you're afraid you might not get to because of time, make an appendix to your presentation. Add that slide to the end of your presentation so that maybe you can pop it up during the questions and answers. And that's a good idea. Or if you've got slides that might answer some questions, that's a good idea.
okay, so 7 to 10 slides. Bullet points or whatever. You know, a lot of times you see slides that are just full of words. What do you recommend as far as maybe the...
Yeah, bullet points are certainly better than full sentences in your presentation. In your written presentation, you want good grammatic structure, you want full sentences, you want good paragraphs, you want well-stated cases and things like that. In a PowerPoint presentation, you do not want full sentences. You want bullet points that can be read quickly and aren't confusing and not presenting the audience with a giant wall of text. Other questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much for letting me talk to you today. It's been a pleasure, and I wish you all great luck in your competition.
Mike, thank you very much. We appreciate that. A couple comments in closing. First of all, Heather indicated that you need to know who you were playing to. Remember, you're playing to 5 judges. In her comments, she gave you the 4 C's or 5 C's, whatever it was. What you want to do is, in light of the fact that you are playing to the judges are going to be more my age group. They're not going to be your ages. So what I always say is follow the DWTL law, and that is don't write Twitter language. You know, when you want to say you, spell out Y-O-U. Don't use the letter U. It seems like it's common sense, but it's amazing the papers that come in that is speaking in Twitter. So don't speak in Twitter. Speak in using proper English. As for arriving early, Mike suggested to arrive early. Let's now switch to the prizes. First place will be $1,000. Second place is $500, and third place is $250. But also, there's a new element this year. It's on social entrepreneurship. And social entrepreneurship can be defined as taking the tools from your toolbox for an entrepreneur and using them for a social good. For example, let's say that you want a certain country XYZ to have fresh, clean drinking water. What you can do is your idea would be then to create an entrepreneurial venture that would allow you to create clean drinking water for the occupants of country XYZ. That's just an example. It can be something, it doesn't have to be international, it can be local, it can be done right here in our community, it can be done right here on the campus. That's basically what it is. But let's say that you do win the social entrepreneurship prize of $1,000, and let's say that you are also the best overall team or individual for the overall presentation. You win then an additional $1,000. So you could walk away with $2,000, 1 being the first place, 2 being the social entrepreneurship. Now, that being said, whoever wins first place, I'm not talking about the social entrepreneurship, but who wins actually first place, you will then represent Lorain County Community College at the regional competition. And the regional competition is going to be actually on our campus. It will be competing with 10 other schools, the first place winners of 10 other schools. And for that, for actually going to and participating in that presentation, you will receive an additional $1,000. So you could, in fact, walk away with $3,000. $1,000 first place here, $1,000 for the social entrepreneurship, and $1,000 for representing Lorain County Community College at the regional competition. Now, at the regional competition, which will be held on March 31st, first place there, I believe, is $5,000. So you could, in fact, come away with a total of $8,000 if you win the entire thing on that. There will be no social entrepreneurship award, though, at the regional competition. The regional competition is just the first place winners.